this weekend and ask him how many people do you think will come after Niklas got in Berlin 1,000 people coming to his lecture. And I ask Martin, what happens if the room crowds over? And he said there's no problem, overflow, the more they come, the better it is. Geht auch so. Ah, wir übertragen Raum. So, great you are all here. My name is Stefan Winners. I'm CEO of Tomorrow Focus. We have several brands in this country and in Europe. Focus Online is a very large news portal. We have Holiday Check, Elite Partners, and others, and are doing a lot of internet businesses. Allow me to welcome Martin Zeil, our Bavarian Deputy Minister, Prime Minister, and State Minister for Economic Affairs, Infrastructure, Transport, and Technology, who has done us a great honor of accepting our invitation. And Dr. Burda, it's great that you're here today as well, after supporting the digital idea since 20 years with many investments as one of the entrepreneurs who really started very early in the digital business with lots of companies and is always supporting our, what can I say, efforts to build a digital cluster in this country. Thank you very much that you did that and that you attend today here at this lecture. And of course, we are thankful for Thomas Hess and Martin Spann, who made it possible today to do this lecture here. And the most important things, our two great entrepreneurs who are here today, Niklas Zennström, co-founder of Skype and now CEO of Atomico, and Lars Hindrichs, founder of Sing and now Kinko Capital. It's my honor just to give you a 5-minute overview and to show you what we are doing here with IBC. And just to show you where we're standing at the moment, we have to take a look where our industry is standing. As a matter of fact, 0 internet companies come from Germany if you look at the reach for the top 150 websites. Not one. Spiegel.de is the first site at position 152, which is in this global ranking, which shows us what tremendous challenge we have to do. Are German websites out of the running? At DLD, we have discussed today a lot about venture capitalism, which is a source for building new companies. If you look at the figures of new capital raised by venture capital companies in 2010, Germany had 350 million euros raised, where USA 9 billion. And that brings us to the question, are the right conditions in place for startup companies to provide enough money to grow companies? If we look at revenues per user, German news portals like Focus, Spiegel, or all the others make probably per user 1 to 3 euro, depending what kind of brand you have. Facebook is being estimated between 3 and 5 euros, Google 17 to 20, because they have an outstanding technology behind. And that brings us to the question, are we pursuing the right strategy? If we go on the content side and compare, last the company you have created, Sing, and now of course left the company I think 2.5, 3 years ago. But if we look at the real figures now in 2011, we see that Sing has 11 million members, where LinkedIn has 120 million on a global scale. And the same with Holiday Check, a company I'm in charge for. If we look at the real figures, we have 2.2 million hotel ratings, hotel recommendations, compared with 10 million of TripAdvisor. And that brings us to the question, are we going international fast enough or defining our markets too narrowly? Are we focusing too much on the German markets where our global competitors actually roll out the companies very aggressively throughout the world? And there is a clear but. If you look on the technician side, we have 30% more patent applications per capita in Germany than in the USA. It is not the problem in this country and in different other countries in Europe as well, that we are not providing enough engineers if you look on patents, but in the technology field where we are far behind. If we look on an industry, and that's also very funny, 20 years ago, everyone said the Americans have taken over the whole flight or manufacturing of aircrafts in the world. Today, the figures are different. Airbus is getting ground and ground. And wherever Airbus is now selling planes, Boeing tries to stop that and the other way around. And the question is, seeing that an industry who was really 100% or more or less in the hands of Boeing, how did that work? How was it possible actually to change that? So the US-dominated industry was changed now, at least in a duopoly where you have two strong global leaders. And of course, we have hidden champions and global market leaders from Germany, and not only from Germany. You will find those companies also in Italy, France, Sweden, wherever you are. There are enough world leaders, world companies who are leaders. And the question for us today is, how can we build powerful global market leaders in the internet sectors as well? Just from our perspective, what we think, we need open markets. And these are now, from the position we have discussed many times, what we think, what we need in this field, we need open markets. Only open markets provide us that we come with European companies in the space and are able to grow our companies and not being, what can I say, just being destroyed in the beginning by very strong competitors from abroad. And just one example here, my most favorite one is Google, a company I really like. Who of you is using Google every day you switch on your computer? Every day you switch on your computer. Well, the actual figures are more than 90% of all searches are done by Google. And if you see what Google is doing, and Dr. Bode has made it clear many times, Google is placing its own products in front of the competitors' products. Well, now we can discuss whether this is something good, just because user experience is much better at Google products. I have my doubts, and everyone who would like to read more should go on Ben Edelman's page. This is a Harvard professor, the only person who was not allowed in America in the congressional hearing. It's benedelman.org from Harvard Business School, and he was the only person blocked by Google to appearing in the antitrust case in Washington. And he has just done huge research what Google has done actually to provide, no, let's say, actually to kill competitors or to push competitors back. We need open markets, that is very important. We need world-class education, and that's the reason why we're doing such a huge effort here to meet you, to see you, to provide with our internet business cluster, which we are here created together with Pro7sat.1, with Border Digital, with Tomorrow Focus, with the institutes of Professor Hess and Professor Spann, provide world-class education to give you the opportunity to work in our classes, in our companies, to come to your classes, to talk to you, to show how digital businesses are running, to do projects, to do research projects, to build a digital cluster, and to give you a world-class education. Not only in Stanford, MIT or Harvard, but also here in the right of the center of Munich. And of course, we need world-class entrepreneurs who see in a desert not only the dust, but lots of opportunities and lots of chances, if nothing is there, to create something new and to create new businesses. It's a great pleasure and honor today for me to introduce to you two world-class entrepreneurs, Niklas Zennström and Lars Hinrichs. And just to introduce you, Niklas has co-founded Skype, used in other companies. Skype is, I think, publicly well known, sold to eBay, then bought back, then sold again to Microsoft. You have a fund. You're doing several investments. You're very actively in the community and the venture community and have investments in very interesting companies. And Lars Hinrichs, the founder of Sing. Lars, you're here today as well just to interview Niklas because you have went through this experience in building up your own company. Great question you ask. We were sitting here 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago in an office, and the first question you asked, how many dropouts do you have here in your class? Because in American, what can I say, American venture and tech business, we have many dropouts, and you have proven to build large companies, even if I understood it correctly, that you have been a classical dropout. So very successful growing. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish us an interesting discussion. Now I hand over to you, Lars. It's your turn. Thank you very much for your interest. Thanks.
So I'm definitely not a journalist, but I made some questions. Very analog now. So, Niklas, you actually studied. Why didn't you drop out?
No one told me. No, I was told that it was probably a good thing to get a good education. But also, when I started and I graduated in 1991, studied in Sweden, I'm sure it was very similar to here. There was really no ecosystem around startup companies, about entrepreneurship. And when I studied, everyone thought, okay, you graduate, if you went to engineering school or business school, you go and work in Sweden, you went to work for Ericsson. Maybe you went to work for one of the large consulting firms. If you studied finance, you maybe wanted to go into banking. There was not really any ecosystem for entrepreneurs, no role models, so and no kind of investors. So although I thought that I wanted at some point start my own company, but I didn't see that there was any opportunity to do it, and in a short term.
So I'm sure that you partied a lot during your student years, but what actually have you learned in university?
I forgot what I learned. I'm kidding. So I think one of the one of the very important things what you learn first of all is that you create a network of people that you then can work with further on in your life. But to me, it was very much the problem solving ability that you have a challenging course in quantum mechanics or calculus, which seems very daunting, but you realize that you can take on that challenge and learn from it and pass that course. So it's about putting challenges in front of you and manage those challenges. I think that was very much part of it, as much as learning specific disciplines. But I think it's also very, very different for different people. Myself, I was someone studied engineering, engineering physics and then computer science. But I also realized that while I loved technology, I was fascinated by the technology, I wanted to apply the technology in a business setting. So I thought that I need to complement my engineering studies with business studies as well.
So I think many students and many people in the European internet actually admire you as the #1 role model, the most successful entrepreneur since SAP coming out of Europe. So what are your role models?
Well, I think I think the role models are changing all the time, and but I think it's also role models are great to have, but I think you should also look around you and find inspiration from from yourself, from your peers, your parents, and people around you. But I think I remember when studying computer science and read about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and that kind of generation, and I think it was quite fascinating what some of those guys achieved.
Today you invest with your own company, and given that you have so much experience, what are the top 3 advice you give to your companies?
I think there's a few things that all companies need to think about, but there's also different situations. But if you need to try to not to overcomplicate things. Some companies try to make things. They have a business model which is too complicated, and then it's less likely to be successful. I think that's one thing, and try to just, build products that solves a problem, and that can, that yourself would use, that your friends would use, and try to, experiment early on rather than making a theoretical, a business plan. Come out and try to do prototypes and try to test your ideas, your products, people around you, before you invest a lot of time in building the products.
Are we Europeans thinking too complicated?
I don't know if that's a European specific trait or not, but sometimes we are trying to complicate things too much. And the third advice I would also say is to try to get the best possible people around you, and that means that try to get the best possible co-founders in your company, because being a single founder and try to start a company can work for some people, but most cases you're benefiting of having 1 or 2 or 3 co-founders, because if you're a group of people and think together and bounce ideas and challenge each other, it's more likely that you're going to come up with something that is more viable. And also it's more fun to work together with a group of people. And when things are hard, when times are hard, it's also nice to be a few people to share the hard times together with.
So how did you find Janos then?
Well, I hired him when I was working for Tele2, which was a competitive phone company and an internet service provider, and he was one of the persons I hired when I was in Copenhagen to build services there. So I think sometimes you can find good people just by iteration, and but I think university is a great opportunity actually to find people to work with, because you have the different disciplines. Maybe some people are studying business, some others are engineering, someone else is studying behavioral science. So this is actually a very, very good environment to get to know other people that you may possibly work together with.
So you hired Janos, and then you became a equal shareholder in your own company. So
yeah, we decided to be equal partners and do everything together, and it just it worked really well for us. And it was also, what happened for me was that I spent quite some time working for a company or for a few companies before we started our own company. And I think was also one of the reasons I did that was that in the 90s there was not so much, as I said, there was not so many kind of startup companies around, and not so many you didn't know where to go to get financing and how to go about to do things. So I thought that I joined a great company which was very entrepreneurial. So I learned a lot from working in that company in Tele2, and then finally I together with Janis said, okay, let's go out and start our own company. I think one of the reasons why we hesitated personally was I was probably afraid of the failure that you could have, because I was doing well. I was working for this company. I got promoted from time to time, and I got a salary increase, and I had some stock options with the company. And if I would then leave, should I leave that and go out and have no salary and work for myself? And that potentially is a pretty dangerous thing to do, I thought. So I think that was probably something that held me back.
So
which didn't hold you back?
I only studied one day, so I was some kind of entrepreneur, I think, by myself. So definitely starting this company then. How did you find the first employees? What are your secret tricks in hiring the best people?
Well, that's probably one of the hardest things, is to find good people around you. And in the early days of a company, it's even more important to find good people, because if the first 2 or 3 people that you bring on board, if they're not good, if they don't fit in, then probably the whole business is going to go under. So, for me, I was lucky, because since I had already been working for another company for several years, and there was some really, really good software developers that we'd worked with as third-party contractors, and these guys were the first ones we asked, if they want to work with us when we started, and we had worked together, we knew each other, and they said, yeah, sure. Well, I didn't say sure first, we had to convince them. And that's also one thing I learned, being an entrepreneur is about being a salesman. you have to sell your ideas to everyone, to people that you want to hire. You need to sell your, sell your ideas to investors, to your first customers, and sometimes even to your own family.
Did your family believe in you?
Yeah, I was very lucky, because my wife said, like, because I was like, should I start my company? Should we do it? Should we not do it? What about if it doesn't work? And she was the one like, just do it, because I don't want you, if you when you're old, I don't want to hear like, oh, maybe I should have started my own company. Like, at least you go out and try it. Maybe it works, but even if it doesn't work, at least you tried. What can you lose? So she was really supportive, and it was good, because she was, she had a job. So we lived on her salary when we couldn't raise money. So that was. Did she ever
question in the first months maybe if this was the right decision?
There was a few times that she maybe was a little bit doubtful, but I think she believed in me. But there was a few times when things did not look so good for us.
Maybe you can share some of this kind of moments.
Yeah, when we in 2000 we started our company. We started to build this file sharing company, Kazaa. And one of the companies we looked at as an interesting kind of concept that we did something very, very similar was Napster. And they started to get massive litigation going with them. And we said, oh, we're going to do this anyway, because we know this is not going to be for music. This is going to be for any kind of content. People are going to be sharing, photos and videos and anything. And it started to be quite hairy at some point. And we, traffic didn't grow that much, and we got rejected by investors all the time, but we just kept going at it. And so there were a few times in the early days which was pretty tough.
So engineers are known for not the best sales activities. So how did you overcome this mantra?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't know if I was, very good in selling stuff, but then there's something that you just have to do. I think you realize, you've done that the same thing, is that you realize that you have to go out and do it. I think it also, if you believe in what you're doing, it's not like you're not really selling something, you're more convincing people. It's very, very...
the evangelist?
Yeah, I think it's more about being an, if you truly believe in what you're doing, that the business you're building and the product you're trying to build, if you truly believe this is a great thing, you're gonna, people are gonna see that you believe in it, and you're going to evangelize more than selling.
So with Kazaa, many people then accused you of doing illegal stuff or supporting piracy. You were not allowed to go to the US for some time. So what did your family say to this?
Well, the numbers were probably that there were 100 million people who thought it was fantastic, and there were 5 companies who thought it wasn't that great, and there were the lawyers of those companies. Actually, the creative people and the business development people at the record companies, they thought this was the future. So there was basically the lawyers, the record companies, who thought that this was not so great. So, but what happened was that clearly file sharing was very, very disruptive to music distribution, to movie distribution, and we thought this is great. This is the most efficient way to distribute digital content, because you can just transfer it on the internet with peer-to-peer technology. It's a built-in search engine, so you just type in what you want. So we went to the record company and said, this is fantastic. We think we can have a business model here with advertisement or subscription or pay-per-view. And it's no, they didn't even want to take our meetings, and we cannot understand why they didn't see the future. But then you speak to them a bit later, and then you understand that for them it's really hard, because they have a business model which is based on physical distribution, and then this whole internet thing comes completely from the side, and it was very, very hard for them to understand, and they didn't want to understand also, to be frank. But it was really hard for them to understand, and it took a few years for them to to get it right. So one thing we learned from that experience was that the timing is also very good, to have the right timing. We had a horrible timing, because we were kind of the ones that became, okay, we're going to nail these guys because we need to put an example in place. And we were basically the last ones that they kind of sued, because the guys who did it after us was YouTube, and then Apple came and did iTunes. So we should have waited a few years.
But if you would have waited, we wouldn't have Skype now. So
No, so that was, for me, I never ever regretted anything with Kazaa. It ended up costing me money, and it was like,
you actually lost money with Kazaa?
yeah, because I put in my savings. We could not raise. We went to all the investors around in Europe, and no one wanted to put in money. One of the guys who rejected me was Matthias Jungmann, who's now a partner at Atomico. So and I understand why people didn't want to invest, because it was kind of it was a lot of litigation risk. But for me, it was like, it's also very much about being an entrepreneur. It's about being iterative. You try one thing, it maybe works, it doesn't work, and then eventually you figure out that it doesn't work and say, okay, what can we learn from this experience? Let's debrief, and how can we do something differently? So I would never have done Skype if I did not first did Kazaa.
So Skype is kind of a massive success story. So maybe you can share some war stories about the early days of Skype. Definitely now you have like 500 million people, sold the company twice, which is rare. So, but the early days of Skype, how was it?
Well, I think one of the big challenges. So we started Skype in 2002, and the way it was started was that, with Kazaa, we decided that, okay, this became just too much litigation, and we had massive lawsuits going on with record companies and movie studios in the US. We actually won in the Supreme Court in the Netherlands, but then the movie industry and the record industry they tried to move this to the US. That's why I decided not to travel to the US. I wasn't allowed into the country, but we decided to avoid it. So we said, okay, let's kind of, okay, that's going to take too long time to work with the entertainment industry. So, but we really believed in the peer-to-peer technology that it created such an opportunity to do things to move any kind of data on the internet in a much more efficient way. So we said, okay, how can we take this to the next level? So we started a new company. This was called Jolted, and this was our vision. There was to build basically an API on the internet with a peer-to-peer API that anyone else could just tap into and search and retrieve mail tokens. So we tried to do this, and we were not successful in getting a lot of customers with this service. So we ran out of funding, and we said, okay, so we need to at least try to reduce our costs. So, I was in Stockholm, my Janus was in Copenhagen, our developers were in Estonia, we had one person in Amsterdam. So we spent a lot of time speaking on the telephone, and we got a relatively large phone bills. I think one day we said we should just set up a voice over IP system so we can at least reduce cost, because we speak a lot with each other.
So it was happened by accident.
And a little bit like that. So we tried to set up existing voice over IP systems, and we had some pretty good engineers in our team, and we cannot really get it to work. And I thought this is very, very strange, because I remember a few years back when I was at Tele2, we did some field trials with voice over IP, and we said, well, it's not really, the internet is not good enough today, but it should be okay later on. So we looked into this, why none of the systems were working that well, and we figured out that we're all designed basically by telecommunications engineers, not because telecommunications engineers are bad engineers, but they were designed for a controlled network. But in 2002, we all started to have broadbands, and we put routers on our broadband connections, so we can have multiple computers, and that means that you cannot be, the computer behind the router was not addressable from outside. That's why voice over IP did not work. And we said, well, that's a pity. There was like one day, it's like, well, actually, this is what we're very good at, because voice over IP file sharing is all about connecting software, client to client, peer to peer. So, wow, maybe we can use the peer to peer technology to power, to power voice over IP, and then it can actually work. I think one day we were very excited about. We realized this actually could be the technical solution to a technical problem. And the other thing here where timing was great was because this was when people started to migrate from dial-up modems to broadband connections. And voice over IP with a modem is not that great, because you have to dial up, and the other one has to dial up to the internet, and then you have to have a phone call, which didn't really make sense. so we were really excited and realized this could actually become huge. This could really change the way we communicate if it works. There's still an assumption at the time